There's a video circulating online featuring an Asian man who appears fully animated, though in reality it seems to be computer generated. If you look carefully, it becomes obvious. The video contains some useful points, but it also spreads misinformation. He claims that silver can now be confiscated because it's classified as an essential mineral, and even cites a bill number, HR 9847. I have that written down, but it's incorrect, and I'll clarify why shortly. Historically, the US government did confiscate gold in 1933 under Executive Order 6102 during the Great Depression. The gold standard, which was the focus at that time, had more to do with monetary policy than energy or environmental concerns, and it was invalidated in 1984. The video's narrator suggests HR 9847 could allow a similar move for silver, but that's a misunderstanding. The video also talks about dealing with precious metals dealers in ways that should be avoided. HR 9847, the Early Childhood Leaders Act, modifies the Higher Education Act of 1965. It does not concern silver or its classification as an essential mineral. The Green Bill he references is also unrelated. A formal executive order, not legislation, determined the status of silver. The narrator goes on to warn that when you spend more than $10,000, you must fill out a Form 8300, citing scenarios like spending large sums on clothing or precious metals. While it is true that Form 8300 exists for certain cash transactions, the video exaggerates the threat, implying government agents might come to your house. That is false. To summarize, HR 9847 has nothing to do with silver confiscation. The actual executive order designated silver as a critical mineral, aiming to speed up energy infrastructure projects and permitting processes. It does not authorize government seizure of private holdings. The video's claims are a mixture of fact, fiction, and fear-mongering, amplified by AI-generated visuals. Silver's classification as an essential mineral was meant to ensure strategic supply for industrial, energy, and defense purposes. The US government's goal is to form partnerships with mining companies, expedite permitting, and create strategic reserves of silver, along with other critical minerals like platinum, palladium, and copper. This explains some of the upward pressure on prices. Beyond domestic concerns, global movements are influencing the market. JP Morgan reportedly holds over 750 million ounces of silver, valued at nearly $40 billion. This is said to be the world's largest stockpile. Previously, banks used paper contracts to suppress silver prices, but now positions are shifting from short to long, physically buying silver and removing it from the market. COMEX categorizes silver as eligible and registered. Registered silver can be delivered and sold, while eligible bars sit in vaults and may not enter the delivery system immediately. Reports indicate that 16.6 million ounces were removed from COMEX's register, effectively exiting the deliverable market. This action increases scarcity and contributes to rising prices. As prices rise, industrial demand grows. Companies like Tesla, Sony, and Samsung rely on silver for electronics, batteries, and technology. Higher prices incentivize mining and stockpiling to meet future demand. Meanwhile, AI-driven videos sensationalize government confiscation and compliance fears. Your silver is not at risk of seizure under HR 9847. The real story is much bigger. Governments and large institutions are strategically acquiring physical silver, leaving Western paper markets increasingly irrelevant in determining supply and price. China, as the world's leading silver refiner, is tightening control over exports. Beginning January 1st, 2026, it will impose limits on refined silver shipments. By buying concentrate directly from Peru and Mexico, China bypasses Western intermediaries, paying higher prices to secure raw materials. This is part of a strategic global supply initiative, not a domestic confiscation plan. The takeaway is clear. The AI video amplifies half-truths, mislabels legislation, and creates unnecessary panic. Silver's importance today is geopolitical, industrial, and strategic, not a repeat of 1933's gold confiscation. Picking up from where we left off, let's dive deeper into why silver is moving the way it is and what global players are doing. The Asian AI video paints a dramatic picture of imminent confiscation, but the reality is more nuanced and much larger than door-to-door government raids. The key players aren't individuals. They're corporations, sovereign nations, and large institutional investors. Take JP Morgan, for instance. Reports from the Economic Times indicate that the bank holds over 750 million ounces of physical silver, valued at nearly $40 billion. That is an enormous position, potentially the largest single stockpile of silver in history. For context, the COMEX market traditionally relied on paper contracts to influence the price of silver. Banks would use short positions to suppress price spikes artificially. But now, JP Morgan has reportedly shifted its stance from being the largest short seller to the largest long holder in the market. This shift is significant. In a 6-week period, the bank allegedly closed a 200 million ounce paper short position and added 21 million ounces of actual silver to its inventory. Meanwhile, 16.6 million ounces were removed from the COMEX registered inventory, meaning they are no longer immediately deliverable. This creates a scarcity effect. Prices rise when physical supply tightens, and industrial demand responds accordingly. Eligible versus registered silver matters here. Eligible silver is stored in approved vaults, but cannot yet be used for COMEX deliveries. Registered silver is actively available for settlement. Moving metal from registered to non-deliverable or eligible status removes it from the active market, increasing pressure on prices. This is what we are seeing right now. Scarcity caused not by government confiscation, but by strategic accumulation. Industrial demand for silver is another critical factor. Silver is indispensable in electronics, renewable energy, EV batteries, and medical devices. Companies like Tesla, Sony, and Samsung rely on it. The more prices rise, the greater the incentive for these companies to secure long-term contracts or reserves. In economics, this is part of why silver is behaving like a giffen good in this environment. Higher prices increase demand because scarcity makes access more valuable than cost. Now let's look at the international scene. China controls the majority of the world's silver refining. Beginning January 1st, 2026, China will impose export limits on refined silver. They are purchasing raw concentrate directly from top-producing countries like Mexico and Peru, bypassing Western intermediaries. The prices they pay are often double what Western buyers offer. Why? They are securing strategic reserves to control supply within the BRICS bloc and support domestic industries. This is not speculative. Shipping records confirm that concentrate is being purchased and sent to Chinese refineries, avoiding traditional Western distribution networks. The West has long underestimated the importance of silver in technology, defense, and energy. China, on the other hand, understands it as a critical material for national security and industrial dominance. Meanwhile, India remains a massive importer of silver, driven by cultural, monetary, and investment demand. Despite high global prices, Indians are holding silver rather than selling scrap back into the market. This further tightens global supply. Western investors and institutions may watch the COMEX paper market for price signals, but the reality is that physical silver is leaving the delivery pool rapidly. The takeaway here is that the AI video's scare tactics about confiscation miss the larger story entirely. The real driver of price and market tension is strategic accumulation by institutions and sovereign nations. These moves are deliberate and transparent for those tracking shipping, vault registrations, and industrial contracts. It's a global competition for a metal that underpins the energy transition, defense technology, and semiconductor supply chains. In short, silver is no longer a simple commodity. It is a strategic asset. Governments and corporations are positioning themselves to control access and supply, while retail investors often remain focused on paper markets and price speculation. The coming months will reveal how these accumulated positions influence prices, industrial availability, and the balance of global supply. Continuing our analysis, let's focus on logistics, delivery systems, and Western market vulnerabilities. The AI video frames the story as if the government is about to knock on doors to seize silver, but the real tension lies in the physical supply chain. COMEX and LBMA are central here because they represent the largest pools of deliverable silver in the Western system. Physical silver isn't just a number on a trading screen. The metal must be stored, transported, and certified before it can settle against contracts. Delivery delays, particularly in London, have reached 8 weeks, far beyond normal expectations. Trucks aren't missing. The issue is that registered, deliverable silver is no longer in sufficient quantity. As inventories deplete, the paper market loses its grip and prices become more sensitive to physical demand. Consider this. During November, roughly 19.7 million ounces of silver and 1.27 million ounces of gold were delivered, far above typical monthly flows. December's deliveries continue at similar rates, with over 58 million ounces of silver moved into active circulation so far. These are not trivial numbers. They represent a substantial drain on Western inventory, signaling that large institutional and sovereign players are stockpiling aggressively. COMEX registered, silver is shrinking. 16.6 million ounces were moved off the register, and another 169 million ounces were shifted to non-deliverable categories. This means the metal exists, but it is no longer part of the settlement system used to satisfy paper contracts. To re-enter the COMEX system, the silver must be reassayed and re-registered, a deliberate bottleneck that reduces supply temporarily and creates scarcity pressure on prices. This supply drain is happening in parallel with industrial demand spikes. Silver is irreplaceable in solar panels, EV batteries, semiconductors, and military applications. High prices do not deter industrial users. They incentivize securing long-term supply. Tesla, Samsung, and defense contractors aren't worried about cost. They need access. That is why silver's price is behaving anomalously as a giffen good. Scarcity drives demand despite rising cost. On the geopolitical side, China is actively consolidating supply. By buying raw concentrate directly from Peru and Mexico, they bypass Western refiners. This pre-refined material is shipped straight to Chinese refineries, where it is processed and stockpiled. With export quotas taking effect January 1st, 2026, the global flow of refined silver from China to the West will slow dramatically. China is effectively locking in control of strategic reserves. India also contributes to supply tension. Cultural and monetary demand drives Indians to hold silver aggressively. Scrap silver that might normally re-enter the market is being retained, further tightening global availability. Combine this with institutional stockpiling in the West, and the paper market signals become increasingly disconnected from physical reality. Meanwhile, JP Morgan's pivot from short to long adds a critical layer. Previously, banks suppressed silver prices through paper shorts. Now, as the largest holder of physical silver, their position creates upward pressure as scarcity and demand converge. This is why the AI video's focus on government seizure is misleading. The real forces at work are market manipulation, supply shortages, and strategic national accumulation. The takeaway is that the Western system's reliance on fractional reserve delivery is reaching a breaking point. Physical silver is being withdrawn faster than it can be replaced. Paper contracts no longer reflect real-world availability. Investors watching COMEX or LBMA prices are seeing a lagging signal, while the underlying scarcity intensifies. Now, let's shift the lens to China's role in the silver market and how it is reshaping global supply dynamics. Unlike the AI video that exaggerates government seizure, the true story is strategic stockpiling and supply chain control. China refines the majority of the world's silver, even though it isn't the top miner. They import raw concentrate from Mexico and Peru, refining it domestically before exporting refined metal. This gives China near total control over how much silver reaches the West, creating a bottleneck that is invisible until delivery delays hit. Starting January 1st, 2026, China will impose export quotas and licensing requirements on refined silver. In simple terms, the global pipeline for silver, from Peru and Mexico to Western markets, is about to be curtailed. The raw material is still extracted, but China now determines where, when, and how it is refined and distributed. The implications are enormous. Western industrial users, investors, and governments will compete for a shrinking pool of deliverable metal. The US government recognizes silver as a strategic mineral, not for confiscation, but for national security and industrial resilience. Executive orders prioritize energy infrastructure, supply chain resilience, and strategic stockpiling. For instance, silver is essential in solar panels, EV batteries, semiconductors, missile guidance systems, and radar technology. Without guaranteed access to silver, the US risks crippling critical industries in a future geopolitical conflict. Unlike the 1933 gold confiscation, today's policy is about proactive resource security, not door-to-door seizures. Meanwhile, institutional and corporate stockpiling continues. JP Morgan's transformation from short to long positions demonstrates a shift in market strategy, from suppressing silver prices to controlling physical supply. Over 750 million ounces of silver, worth nearly $40 billion, are in their possession. This is enough to corner a substantial portion of the Western market, influencing both COMEX pricing and real-world availability. Combined with China's concentration, this means global supply is increasingly constrained, driving prices higher. Industrial demand compounds scarcity. Companies like Tesla, Sony, and Samsung rely on silver for electronics, batteries, and renewable technologies. Governments require it for defense systems. As demand rises and supply is redirected or withheld, silver behaves as a given good. Higher prices do not deter consumption because access is prioritized over cost. The physical metal becomes more valuable as it becomes harder to obtain, reinforcing upward price pressure. India also plays a significant role. Cultural and monetary demand drives citizens to hold silver as both wealth storage and investment. Even at elevated prices, scrap silver that could re-enter the market is retained by private holders, further tightening Western availability. The combined effect of institutional stockpiling, sovereign accumulation, and private retention creates a perfect storm for supply shortages. Delivery systems are under unprecedented stress. The LBMA and COMEX face record withdrawals from registered inventories. 16.6 million ounces of silver have been removed from deliverable pools, and 169 million ounces have been moved to non-deliverable categories. This isn't a logistical problem. It's a deliberate physical withdrawal of metal, signaling a transition from paper-based market control to real accumulation of strategic metal. The consequences are clear. Western markets are increasingly vulnerable. The paper market's illusion of abundance is breaking down as real metal exits delivery channels. Prices are now influenced by geopolitical strategy, industrial necessity, and supply bottlenecks rather than purely financial speculation. Investors who rely solely on COMEX or LBMA paper pricing are underestimating the real physical constraints. We've now reached the crux of the matter. What does this mean for the global silver market, investors, and industrial users? By now, it should be clear that silver is no longer just a commodity or a paper-traded metal. It has evolved into a strategic resource at the center of global competition. The AI video claiming imminent government confiscation is pure fiction. The reality is far more significant. Silver is being actively removed from circulation, stockpiled, and redirected to secure industrial and national interests. Let's start with the United States. The government recognizes silver as essential for energy infrastructure, defense, and critical technologies. The executive orders are not about seizing silver from private holders. They are about ensuring supply security, forming partnerships with miners, expediting permits, and strategically stockpiling silver alongside other critical minerals like palladium, platinum, and copper. In short, the US is positioning itself for future technological and military resilience, not conducting a gold-era style raid on citizens' holdings. Meanwhile, China's actions are shifting the balance of supply. By controlling the refining of 70% of global silver, implementing export quotas, and purchasing raw concentrate directly from Peru and Mexico, China is ensuring that the majority of silver remains within its sphere of influence. This disintermediation bypasses Western refiners entirely, creating a geopolitical bottleneck. The effect is immediate. Supply is constrained, delivery channels are tightened, and prices are pushed upward. Industrial users, from EV battery manufacturers to semiconductor plants, are now competing with sovereign buyers for a shrinking pool of silver. JP Morgan and other institutions also play a critical role. Their 750 million ounce long position demonstrates a dramatic shift in strategy, controlling physical supply rather than just paper contracts. This combination of sovereign stockpiling and institutional accumulation has created an environment where supply, not speculative demand, dictates prices. Add to that India's cultural demand for physical silver, and it's clear why prices are climbing even as Western markets debate the value of $30–40 per ounce. Logistics and delivery systems are equally stressed. Withdrawals from registered COMEX inventories, movement to non-deliverable vaults, and delayed LBMA shipments highlight that physical metal is leaving the system faster than it can be replaced. This is not a temporary blip. It's a structural shift in the way silver flows globally. Paper markets can no longer mask real-world scarcity, and investors relying solely on futures prices may find themselves unprepared for the impact of physical shortages. The broader takeaway is simple but profound. Silver is now a strategic lever in global economics, technology, and defense. Supply control is the new battlefield, and access to physical metal outweighs cost concerns. Western nations, investors, and industrial users must recognize that the old assumptions of abundant, cheap silver are no longer valid. Anyone ignoring this reality risks being on the losing side of a strategic resource competition. For investors, the implications are clear. Physical ownership, understanding delivery constraints, and monitoring global supply chains are now critical. Paper positions and ETF holdings cannot substitute for real metal in a market increasingly dominated by sovereign and institutional stockpiling. Industrial users should anticipate tight supply and rising costs, planning accordingly for procurement and strategic reserves. Finally, the geopolitical element cannot be overstated. BRICS nations, led by China, are coordinating resource acquisition and supply control, while the West struggles to respond. The impact on technology, energy infrastructure, and national defense is immediate and ongoing. The age of treating silver as a mere commodity is over. It is now a critical, finite, and highly contested asset. In conclusion, forget the sensational AI warnings of confiscation. The real story is supply scarcity, strategic stockpiling, and global competition. Prices are rising because physical silver is being withdrawn from circulation, not because of arbitrary market speculation. Industrial and sovereign demand is colliding with shrinking supply chains, creating an unprecedented environment for investors and policymakers alike. Those who understand these dynamics and act on them will be positioned to navigate this historic shift in the silver market successfully. Keep tracking these developments. Stay informed on strategic stockpiles, global deliveries, and export restrictions. And remember, silver today is power, technology, and national security, all rolled into one metal.